My name is Kevin Stonefield, but everyone calls me Mac. I've been a Michigan State Trooper for 15 years, the last 7 stationed in the Upper Peninsula, where winter doesn't visit. It moves in for 6 months like a relative you can't evict. I've pulled frozen bodies from snowdrifts, investigated accidents on black ice that turned families into statistics, and driven across Lake Superior when it freezes thick enough to support an 18-wheeler. But nothing in my training, not even my 3 tours in Fallujah, prepared me for what I learned about Superior Protocol 112975 on the night of February 13, 2024. If you're watching this from anywhere near the Great Lakes, you know Superior is different. The Ojibwe, my grandmother's people, call it Gichigami, the Great Water. Gordon Lightfoot sang that Superior never gives up her dead when the gales of November come early. But he only had part of the truth. Superior doesn't give up her dead because they're not dead. They're something else. And every winter, when the lake freezes solid enough to drive on, they walk. It started as a routine patrol shift. My partner, Jennifer Kowalski, Jen to everyone but the brass, and I were monitoring the ice road that forms between St. Ignace and Mackinac Island when the weather cooperates. It's not an official road, technically illegal, but locals have been using it for generations. Snowmobilers, ice fishermen, and occasionally people who don't want to be found. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. A convenience store owner in Paradise reported a robbery. 2 men, armed, fled north in a black Dodge Ram with Minnesota plates. They were heading toward the lakeshore, probably planning to cross the ice to Canada. 30 miles of frozen water between them and international boundaries. Unit 237, we have visual on the suspect's vehicle. Jen radioed as we crested the hill overlooking Whitefish Bay. The moon was full, turning the frozen lake into a silver desert that stretched to the horizon. The Dodge Ram's taillights were visible about a quarter mile ahead, already on the ice. I checked my watch. 11:53 p.m. Dispatch, Unit 237 in pursuit of robbery suspects now on lake ice, requesting backup, I called in. There was a pause before dispatch responded. Unit 237, what's your exact time? 23:54 hours, I replied, accelerating onto the ice. The studded tires bit into the surface with a crackling sound like breaking bones. Unit 237, be advised, you have 6 minutes until midnight. Superior Protocol is in effect. I'd heard about Superior Protocol during training, filed somewhere between procedures for governor's escort and other things we'd probably never use. Some archaic rule about not pursuing suspects onto lake ice after midnight. Probably liability concerns about ice conditions. Dispatch, we have visual on suspects. We can end this in 5 minutes, Jen said. Negative, Unit 237. Superior Protocol is mandatory. Return to shore immediately. I looked at Jen. She shrugged. Your call, Mac. But they're right there. The Dodge was slowing down, maybe half a mile ahead. They thought they'd lost us or were checking their GPS. 5 minutes, that's all we needed. Dispatch, we're continuing pursuit, I said, making the decision that would change everything. The radio exploded with voices. Not just dispatch, other units, officers I recognized, all talking over each other. Mac, get off the ice. You don't understand. It's 11:58. I turned the volume down. We were gaining on the Dodge, 400 yards, 300. At 11:59, the temperature in our patrol car dropped 20 degrees in a second. The windows instantly frosted over from the inside. Jen frantically scraped at the windshield with her sleeve. What the hell? At 12 a.m. exactly, February 14th, 2024, Lake Superior changed. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not quiet, silence. The engine was still running, but I couldn't hear it. Our sirens were on, but they made no sound, It was like someone had hit the mute button on reality. Then I saw them. A man walked past our patrol car. He was dressed in wool pants and a peacoat, the kind sailors wore in the 1800s. His face was blue-white with frost, and he walked with purpose, heading northeast. He didn't leave footprints. "Mac?" Jen whispered, and I could hear her perfectly in the silence. "Mac, look at the ice." The surface of the lake, which had been covered in snow and ridged with pressure cracks, was now smooth as glass. But beneath it, lights moved. Not reflections. Lights, like lanterns or flashlights, dozens of them, moving in different directions about 10 feet below the surface. The Dodge Ram had stopped 100 yards ahead. Both doors were open, but I couldn't see the suspects. As we watched, the truck began to sink. Not through broken ice. The ice was still solid. It sank through it like the surface was quicksand, disappearing without leaving a hole. "We need to go," Jen said. "Mac, we need to go now." But I couldn't move, because walking toward us from the direction of Canada was a group of 29 men. They wore orange life jackets with EDMUNDFITZGERALD stenciled on them. Their faces were calm, resigned, like men walking to work. As they passed our patrol car, one of them, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, looked directly at me and mouthed a single word: "Run." The Edmund Fitzgerald sank on November 10, 1975, in 530 feet of water, 17 miles from Whitefish Bay. All 29 crew members were lost. Their bodies were never recovered. Superior never gives up her dead. Now I knew why. They weren't dead. They were walking. Behind them came more. A group of Native Americans in traditional winter clothing, pulling sleds that left no tracks. French voyageurs from the 1700s, their canoes carried above their heads despite there being no water. Modern ice fishermen who'd fallen through over the decades, their augers still in hand. All walking with the same purposeful stride, all heading in different directions, all existing in the same space without acknowledging each other. "Mac!" Jen grabbed my shoulder. "The car's sinking." She was right. Our patrol vehicle was descending into the ice just like the Dodge Ram. The solid surface was accepting us without breaking, pulling us down with the inexorable patience of something that had all the time in the world. I threw the car in reverse, but the wheels just spun without sound. We were stuck in ice that wasn't broken, but wasn't solid either. It was something between states, something that shouldn't exist. That's when I heard my grandmother's voice. Impossible, since she'd died in 2003. "Macoons, the lake remembers everything. Every soul it's taken, every boat it's swallowed, every footstep that's crossed its ice. At midnight in winter, it remembers them all at once." A hand pressed against my window, then another, then dozens. The people who walked the ice were gathering around our car, their frozen faces peering in with expressions of curiosity and warning. A child in a 1950s snowsuit, a woman in a Victorian dress, a Coast Guard officer from the 1970s, all of them mouthing the same word: "Run." But there was nowhere to run. We were a quarter-mile from shore, surrounded by the accumulated dead of 3 centuries, and sinking into ice that existed in multiple states simultaneously. "Mac," Jen said, her voice eerily calm, "I need to tell you something about superior protocol." I turned to look at her, and her face had changed. Not physically, but there was a knowledge in her eyes that hadn't been there before. My great-grandfather worked the lakes. He was on the Carl D. Bradley when it went down in '58. But he survived, kind of. He came back different. He told stories about the ice, about what happens after midnight. The state police have known about it since 1929, when an entire squad car vanished on the ice, but the officers walked into the station 3 days later, aged 50 years and 72 hours. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Would you have believed me? Would anyone?" The protocol exists because those who break it either never come back or come back as something else. The lake doesn't just take bodies, Mac. It takes souls and keeps them in rotation, cycling through time every night after midnight. That's why Superior never gives up her dead. They're still in service. The car lurched downward. We were now hood-deep in solid ice, the engine still somehow running. Through the windshield, which should have shown only darkness, I could see down into the lake. But it wasn't water below us. It was a vast space filled with lights, thousands of them, maybe millions, each one a soul caught in Superior's collection. "There's a way out?" Jen said. "But you're not going to like it." Before she could explain, something massive moved beneath us. Not a creature. The lake itself shifted, like a sleeping giant adjusting its position. The lights below swirled in patterns that hurt to follow, and I realized they weren't random. They were organized, cataloged, filed by date, method of death, and something else, purpose. The radio, which had been silent since midnight, suddenly burst to life. But it wasn't dispatch. It was a voice I recognized from old recordings, Captain Ernest McSorley of the Edmund Fitzgerald. "Unit 237, this is the Superior Collective. You have violated Protocol 11-29-75. You have two choices: join the rotation or become an anchor. You have 3 minutes to decide." I looked at my watch. It was 12:13 a.m., but the dial was moving backward. Time wasn't flowing correctly. We were unstuck, caught between the living world above and the collected souls below. "What's an anchor?" I asked Jen. Her face was grim. Someone who exists in both states. Still alive, but connected to the collective. They can travel on the ice after midnight, help lost souls find their rotation, prevent the living from falling through. But they can never leave the Superior Basin. They're bound to the lake forever. And joining the rotation, you become one of them. Walking the ice every night after midnight, existing in all time periods simultaneously, part of Superior's memory. The car sank another foot. Through the side windows, I could see we were now surrounded by a congregation of the dead. They weren't threatening, just waiting to see what we would choose. That's when I saw someone I shouldn't have seen. Someone who wasn't dead. Walking through the crowd, dressed in a modern Michigan State Police uniform, was Captain Michael Harrison, my captain, who I'd spoken to at the station 6 hours ago, who was definitely, absolutely alive. He approached my window and knocked. When he spoke, his voice came through the glass as if it wasn't there. "Mac, I need to explain something about Superior Protocol. Something they don't tell you in training. Something about why the Michigan State Police really exist." The Edmund Fitzgerald crew parted to let him through. The voyageurs stepped aside. Even the Native Americans, who had been here longest, showed him deference. "We're not just law enforcement, Mac. We're gatekeepers, and every generation the lake chooses new ones. Tonight, it's choosing you." Captain Harrison's face was different in the non-light of the frozen lake. His features kept shifting between the man I knew and something older, more fundamental. When he spoke again, his voice carried harmonics that reminded me of ice sheets grinding against each other. "The Michigan State Police was founded in 1917, he said, standing on the solid ice while our patrol car continued its impossible descent. "But the Superior Watch has existed since the first humans crossed the winter ice. The Ojibwe knew. The French knew. Now we know. The lake isn't just water, Mac. It's a consciousness that uses frozen water as neural pathways. Every winter when Superior freezes, it thinks. and what it thinks about is everyone it's ever taken. Captain, with all due respect, what the hell are you talking about? I managed, though my teeth were chattering from more than cold. I'm talking about the real reason we exist. Sure, we write tickets, investigate accidents, keep the peace. But our primary function, the reason Michigan needs state troopers specifically, is to manage the intersection between the living and Superior's collective. Jen was frantically working the radio, trying different channels. Each one brought different voices, some in English, some in French, some in languages that predated European contact. All of them were reporting positions, like some vast ethereal roll call. Schooner Orphan Boy, November 1885, all hands accounted for, continuing Northeastern Circuit. Steamship Cyprus, October 1907, or cargo metaphysically stable, crew maintaining temporal cohesion. Fishing vessel Two Brothers, December 1932, requesting guidance for new arrival, appears to be from non-catalogued timeline. That last transmission made Harrison's expression change. He turned to look northeast, where the lights under the ice were swirling in an agitated pattern. "We have a problem," he said. "The two suspects you were chasing, they're not from our timeline. They're runners, people who use the ice roads to jump between parallel realities, and they've brought something with them that's disrupting the collective. As if, in response, the ice beneath us cracked, not physically, but visually, like a screen developing dead pixels. Through the cracks, I could see not water, but other versions of the same moment. In one, Jen and I had turned back at 11:59. In another, we'd never become cops at all. In a third, Lake Superior had never frozen, and we were drowning in black water. Every winter, Harrison continued, when the lake freezes solid enough, it becomes a dimensional membrane. The ice isn't just frozen water, it's frozen possibility. The collective maintains the stability, keeps the timelines from bleeding together. But sometimes people figure out how to use it, to slide between worlds. That's why we have the protocol. After midnight, the membrane is thinnest. One wrong move and you don't just fall through ice, you fall through reality. The Edmund Fitzgerald crew had formed a circle around us now, their faces patient but concerned. Captain McSorley stepped forward, and when he spoke, it was with the authority of someone who'd been managing this situation for decades. "The runners have brought a destabilizer," he said, his voice carrying despite having no breath to speak with. "A device that disrupts the collective's coherence. If we can't stop them, every soul superior has collected since the last ice age will be released simultaneously into all timelines." "That sounds bad," Jen said, with characteristic understatement. 30,000 years of dead, all trying to exist in the same space-time, McSorley confirmed. "It would tear a hole in reality that would make the Bermuda Triangle look like a puddle." I looked at my watch, 12:31 a.m., but the hands were moving in both directions simultaneously. "So how do we stop them?" Harrison smiled grimly. "That's why the lake chose you, Mac. Your grandmother was a Ojibwe. She walked the ice roads before they had a name for it. The blood remembers, even if the mind forgets. You can do something most can't. You can navigate the ice while conscious, without joining the collective." "But I need to accept the anchor role," I said, understanding flooding through me like ice water. "Not just accept it," Harrison corrected. "Embrace it. Become the bridge between the living and the collected. It's what your grandmother did before you. What her grandmother did before her. The Stonefield line has been watching Superior for 7 generations." I wanted to protest that my grandmother had been a teacher, not some interdimensional guardian. But even as I thought it, memories surfaced. memories that weren't quite mine. Grandma walking out onto the ice at midnight, returning at dawn with frost in her hair and knowledge in her eyes. The way she'd look at Lake Superior like it was a relative she was responsible for. Her last words to me, "When the lake calls, Macoons, don't be afraid." We've been answering for longer than memory. "The suspects," I said, forcing myself to focus. "Where are they now?" One of the voyageurs, still carrying his canoe after 3 centuries, pointed northeast. "Ils sont allés au centre," the center, where all times meet, the center of Lake Superior, in winter, at night, where the ice was oldest and the membrane thinnest. "We need to move," Harrison said. "But your patrol car is compromised. You'll have to walk." "Walk?" Jen looked at the miles of ice stretching into darkness. "It's 15 miles to the center." "Not on the ice roads," said a new voice. I turned to see a Native American woman in traditional winter clothing, but her face was familiar. It was my grandmother, but young, maybe 20 years old. "Grandma," the word came out as a whisper. "Not exactly, Macoons. I'm the memory of her that the lake kept." Every anchor leaves an impression, a guide for the next generation. "I've been waiting for you." She extended her hand. The moment I took it, the world shifted. The ice became transparent and I could see the true structure of Lake Superior. Not just a lake, but a vast neural network. Each frozen molecule a synapse, each crack a thought, each pressure ridge a memory. "The ice roads," she said, "aren't just paths across frozen water. They're paths through time. The collective maintains them, keeps them stable. But in the center, where all roads converge, someone is trying to break the pattern." We began to walk, but walking isn't the right word. We moved through space and time simultaneously. With each step, we passed through different years. I saw the lake in summer, boats crossing unaware of the network beneath them. I saw it in winter, fur traders following the same paths we were walking. I saw it before humans, when things that weren't quite animals and weren't quite spirits moved across the ice. Jen was beside me, her face set with determination. "My family has stories too," she said quietly. "Polish fishermen who went out in winter and came back speaking prophecies. I thought they were just stories." "All stories are true on the ice," my grandmother's memory said. "That's the problem and the solution." The assembled dead moved with us, not following but accompanying. The Edmund Fitzgerald crew maintained formation, their orange life vests bright against the darkness. The voyageurs sang in French, their voices creating harmony with the ice's creaking. Modern victims and ancient spirits all moving toward the center, toward the disruption. As we traveled, Harrison explained more about the protocol. In 1975, when the Edmund Fitzgerald went down, something changed. The loss was so traumatic, so public, that it created a permanent wound in the collective. November 10th became a fixed point, a moment that exists in all timelines simultaneously. That's when we established Protocol 11-2975. November 29th, 1975. The day the memorial service was held. The day the lake formally accepted the crew into the collective. "But why midnight?" I asked. "Because that's when the veil is thinnest. When the living world sleeps, the collective wakes. The protocol isn't just about keeping people off the ice, it's about maintaining the boundary. Every state trooper who's worked Superior knows this, even if they don't understand it. We're not just law enforcement. We're the thin blue line between the living and the accumulated dead." We were getting closer to the center. The ice here was different. Older, deeper, with colors that shouldn't exist. blues that were almost black, whites that contained entire spectrums. And beneath it, the lights were intense, swirling in patterns that looked almost like— "Is that writing?" Jen asked. It was. The lights beneath the ice were forming words, symbols, equations. The collective was thinking, calculating, trying to solve the problem of the destabilizer. There, my grandmother pointed. In the exact center of Lake Superior, where the ice was smooth as glass and thick as bedrock, stood the black Dodge Ram. It hadn't sunk. Instead, it was elevated on a platform of ice that spiraled up like a frozen tornado. The two suspects stood beside it, working on something that looked like a hybrid between a radio tower and a crystalline structure that hurt to look at directly. "The destabilizer," Harrison confirmed. "They're using the lake's own neural network against it, sending contradictory signals through the ice. If they succeed, every timeline that's ever crossed Superior will collapse into this one." "Why would anyone want that?" I asked. One of the suspects must have heard us, though we were still 100 yards away. He turned, and his face was familiar in the worst way. It was me, an older version, scarred, wearing a uniform I didn't recognize. Michigan State Police, but with insignia that included symbols that looked almost like the writing under the ice. Other me smiled and called out, "Because in my timeline, Mac, we failed." The collective broke free in 2019. Superior didn't just give up her dead, she gave them back wrong. Hungry, infectious. The world ended in ice and hunger. I've been jumping timelines looking for one where we succeeded, where the balance held. But there isn't one. In every timeline, eventually the protocol fails. So I decided to collapse them all, create one timeline where we can control the outcome. "By destroying every other possibility," I shouted back, "by consolidating them. 30,000 years of wisdom, all in one place, all in one time. Imagine what we could learn, what we could prevent." "What you could control," Harrison corrected. "You're not saving anyone. You're trying to become the sole gatekeeper between life and death." Other me laughed, but it was bitter. "You'll understand when you see what I've seen." When the ice breaks permanently, when the dead walk in summer, when Superior becomes a wound that infected reality itself. This is mercy. He turned back to the destabilizer, making final adjustments. The ice beneath us began to vibrate, resonating at a frequency that made my bones ache. The lights below swirled faster, and I could see faces in them. Millions of faces, all looking up, all trying to break through. "We have to stop him," Jen said, starting forward. "No," my grandmother said, holding us back. "This is why the lake chose Mac. Not to stop him, but to offer another choice." "What choice?" She smiled with my grandmother's warmth. "The same choice every anchor makes. To hold the line not through force, but through connection. The collective isn't a prison, Macoons. It's a community, and communities are strongest when they choose to stay together." I understood. The destabilizer worked by isolating each soul, making them believe they were alone, trapped. But the truth was they were connected, had always been connected, chose to stay connected. They walked the ice not because they had to, but because they were still part of something. The greatest story Superior had to tell. "I need to go down there," I said. "Not to fight him, but to remind them." "Remind them of what?" Jen asked. "That they chose this." Every soul that Superior keeps chose to stay, to be part of something greater than individual existence. The Edmund Fitzgerald crew could have passed on, but they stayed to guide others. The voyageurs could have faded, but they maintained the old paths. My grandmother could have rested, but she remained to watch over the lake, The collective isn't a collection of victims. It's a volunteer force that keeps the membrane stable, prevents the timelines from collapsing. Harrison nodded slowly. The anchor's true role. Not to chain them, but to remind them why they stay. I walked toward the destabilizer, toward the other version of myself. The assembled dead followed, not as an army, but as witnesses. As I got closer, I could feel the device's effect, the isolation, the despair, the sense that death was an ending rather than a transformation. But I also felt my grandmother's hand in mine, though she was no longer beside me. I felt Jen's partnership, though she was 50 feet back. I felt the connection to every trooper who'd ever worn the badge, every soul who'd ever crossed Superior's ice, every story the lake had collected. "You're wrong," I told my other self. "In your timeline, the protocol didn't fail. You just forgot what it was really for." The other version of myself stopped working on the destabilizer and turned to face me fully. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Not just physical, but existential. This was a man who had lived through the collapse of reality and had been running ever since. Forgot? Other Mac laughed, but there was no humor in it. I watched Superior give back every soul she'd collected in a single night. June 21st, 2019. Summer solstice. The ice was gone, but they came anyway, walking on water like it was solid, pouring into Marquette, Duluth, Thunder Bay. 30,000 years of dead, confused, hungry for warmth they could never feel again. The military tried to stop them. Bullets passed right through. Fire made them multiply. In 3 days, the entire Great Lakes region was overrun. "But that's not what they are," I said, stepping closer. The destabilizer's field made my skin feel like it was trying to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The collective isn't hungry. They're protective. Protective? Other Mac's scarred face twisted. "They killed millions." "No," said Captain McSorley, stepping forward from the assembled dead. His voice carried the weight of 50 years spent understanding his new existence. "We tried to save millions. When the membrane ruptured in your timeline, we manifested physically to hold it closed. But living humans saw us as invaders, attacked us, broke our concentration. The very act of fighting us tore the barrier wider." Other Mac stared at the ghost of the Edmund Fitzgerald's captain. "You're lying. I saw you tear people apart." "You saw us trying to pull people back from dimensional rifts," McSorley replied patiently. "Every person who fell through became a cascade point, a hole that let more timelines bleed through. We were trying to hold reality together with our bare hands, and you shot at us for it." The destabilizer pulsed, sending another wave of isolation through the ice. I felt the collective waver, individual souls starting to pull apart from the whole. Below us, the lights were separating, drifting like stars moving away from each other. "Even if that's true," Other Mac said, his hand hovering over what looked like an activation switch, "this is still the only solution. Consolidate all timelines into one. No more membrane to rupture. No more risk. No more choice," my grandmother's memory said, materializing beside me. "That's what you're really eliminating. The ability to choose. Every soul in Superior's collective chose to stay. They chose to be part of something greater than individual existence." "Chose?" Other Mac's voice cracked. "My partner didn't choose. Jen died trying to evacuate a school when the dead came through. She didn't choose to become one of them." I looked back at my Jen, my partner, still alive and standing with the other troopers. She met my eyes and nodded, understanding passing between us. She walked forward, past the safe zone, into the destabilizer's field. I did choose, she said to Other Mac. Maybe not your version of me, but I'm still Jen Kowalski. And if I died protecting kids, then I died doing exactly what I signed up for. The question is, did I stay dead, or did I join the collective to keep protecting? Other Mac's hand trembled over the switch. She never came back. Even when all the others did, my Jen never came back. Because she moved on, Captain Harrison said quietly. Not everyone joins the collective. Some souls complete their journey and pass beyond Superior's reach. Your Jen finished her duty. She saved those kids and earned her rest. The collective only keeps those who have unfinished business, unfulfilled purposes, or who choose to stay as guardians. I saw the moment Other Mac's certainty cracked. His hand pulled back from the switch slightly. But the membrane, it's failing in every timeline. I've seen it. Because people forgot the protocol's true purpose, I said. It's not about keeping people off the ice. It's about maintaining the relationship between the living and the dead. Every state trooper who honors the protocol reinforces the membrane. Every person who respects Superior's power adds to its stability. But fear and violence tear it apart. The assembled dead began to move closer, not threatening, but supportive. The Edmund Fitzgerald crew, the voyageurs, the Native Americans who'd walked these paths before European contact, modern victims, and ancient spirits, all forming a vast circle around the destabilizer. "We're not your enemy," they said in unison, their voices harmonizing with the resonance of the ice. "We're your ancestors, your predecessors, your guardian angels. We maintain the barrier not to separate life and death, but to ensure they remain in proper balance." Other Mac looked at them all, then at his destabilizer, then at me. "But if I don't do this, if I don't collapse the timelines, my world is still dead. Everyone I knew, everyone I loved, they're gone." "Gone from your timeline," my grandmother's memory said gently, "but existing in others." The multiverse isn't cruel, Macoons. It's generous. Every possible version of every person gets to exist somewhere. Your Jen is gone from your world, but living in countless others. Your failure allowed our success. Your sacrifice teaches us what not to do. The second suspect, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. His voice was strange, echoing with harmonics that suggested he wasn't quite human anymore. "Mac's right," he said to Other Mac. "I've been jumping timelines longer than you. I've seen ones where Superior never freezes, where the collective never forms. They're worse. Without the lake to process death, to give it meaning and structure, the boundary between life and death becomes chaos. Ghosts everywhere, random hauntings, no pattern or purpose. Superior isn't a prison, it's a filter system for the afterlife." Other Mac's shoulders slumped. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "I can't go back to my timeline. There's nothing left. I can't stay here. I'm an anomaly. Where do I belong?" That's when something unexpected happened. The ice beneath the destabilizer began to glow. Not with the cold light of the collective, but with something warmer, more personal. A figure rose from the ice itself, translucent but unmistakably real. It was Jen, Other Mac's Jen, but she wasn't part of the collective. She was something else. A message, a gift from whatever lies beyond Superior's reach. "Mac," she said, her voice carrying despite being barely a whisper. "You beautiful, stubborn fool. I didn't come back because I was done. My duty was complete. But yours isn't. Stop running. Stop trying to fix what happened. Start helping prevent it from happening to others. How?" Other Mac's voice broke completely. "Become an anchor," she said. Not for your timeline, it's gone. But for all timelines, use what you've learned, what you've seen. Help maintain the protocol across all realities. Be the warning, the guide, the guardian that your world didn't have. She reached out and touched his face, and for a moment, he looked younger. Less scarred. More like the cop who'd probably started with the same ideals I had. The collective needs someone who understands the stakes, she continued. Someone who's seen what happens when the balance fails. Be that someone. Not to change the past, but to protect the future. Then she faded, but the warmth remained. Other Mac stood there for a long moment, then walked to the destabilizer and began dismantling it. She's right. She's always right. He looked at me. You know what's coming, don't you? This timeline, it's approaching the same crisis point mine did. 5 years, maybe less. The summer solstice of 2029, confirmed the second suspect, consulting something that looked like a temporal calculator. The membrane will be at its weakest. Without proper preparation, this timeline follows the same pattern as 73% of all parallel realities. Unless, I prompted. Unless the protocol evolves, Captain Harrison said. It's not enough to just keep people off the ice after midnight. We need to educate, to prepare, to strengthen the connections between the living and the collective. Start with the truth, Other Mac said, finishing his dismantling. The destabilizer fell apart, its crystalline components dissolving into the ice like salt into water. Stop hiding what Superior really is. The fear of the unknown is what makes people violent when the dead manifest. If they understood. They'd still be afraid, Jen said, pragmatically. But they'd be prepared, Other Mac countered. Fear with understanding is caution. Fear without understanding is panic, and panic tears the membrane apart. The ice began to change. The platform that had held the Dodge Ram slowly lowered, returning to level with the rest of the frozen lake. The swirling lights below calmed, returning to their normal patterns. The assembled dead began to disperse, walking back to their patrol routes, their eternal circuits that kept the membrane stable. Captain McSorley paused before leaving. The Edmund Fitzgerald remembers, you know. The ship itself is part of the collective now, not just the crew, but the vessel. She helps us navigate, keeps us oriented when the ice roads shift. Everything Superior takes becomes part of the system. Even the destabilizer, I asked. Especially the destabilizer. Its components are being absorbed, analyzed, integrated. The collective learns from every threat, becomes stronger, more adaptable. That's why the protocol needs to evolve, because the threats do too. My grandmother's memory approached Other Mac. You have a choice now, Macoons. Join the collective as you are, scarred and broken but wise, or merge with your parallel self. Combine your timelines, your experiences. Become something new, not quite Mac from either timeline, but a fusion of both. It's dangerous, unprecedented, but it would make you the ultimate anchor. Someone who exists in multiple timelines simultaneously, able to monitor and maintain the protocol across realities. Other Mac looked at me, and I saw myself reflected in his exhausted eyes. The same person, shaped by different tragedies arriving at the same crossroads. What do you think? He asked me. Ready to become something impossible? I thought about everything I'd learned tonight. About Superior not being just a lake but a living consciousness. About the dead not being gone but transformed into guardians. About the protocol not being a rule but a relationship. About my grandmother, my heritage, my destiny as part of a chain of anchors stretching back generations. Jen, I asked my partner, thoughts? She grinned, that same reckless smile she'd had when we'd chased the suspects onto the ice. I say we do it. Besides, someone needs to update the training manual. Don't pursue onto lake ice after midnight doesn't quite cover the dead will manifest and you might merge with alternate versions of yourself. Captain Harrison nodded slowly. The brass is going to have a hell of a time with the paperwork. Screw the paperwork, Other Mac said. Let's save reality first, file reports later. I stepped forward and extended my hand to my other self. The moment we touched, I felt the timeline split, not breaking, but braiding. Two streams of experience flowing together, creating something stronger than either alone. The process was indescribable. I lived through Other Mac's timeline in accelerated fragments, the catastrophe, the running, the desperate search for a solution. He lived through mine, the gradual realization, the acceptance, the choice to protect rather than flee. We met in the middle, two versions of the same soul recognizing each other across impossible distances. When it was over, I was still Mac Stonefield, but more. I remembered two childhoods with the same grandmother telling slightly different stories. I remembered becoming a cop for the same reasons in different decades. I remembered Jen dying and Jen living, and somehow both were true. How do you feel? Jen asked, studying me with concern. Like I'm seeing Superior for the first time, I answered, and my voice carried harmonics from two timelines. And like I've been seeing it forever. The ice beneath us pulsed with approval. The collective had accepted our merger, integrated our paradox into its pattern. We were something new, living anchors who existed in multiple realities simultaneously, able to monitor the protocol across parallel timelines. There's more, Other Mac's memories informed me. Other lakes, other membranes. Superior is the strongest, but every significant body of water where people have died in large numbers develops consciousness. The Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Sea, even smaller lakes like Tahoe and Champlain. They're all connected, all part of a global network that processes death and maintains the boundary between worlds. A worldwide protocol, Harrison mused. We're going to need more anchors. We're going to need more than that, I said, feeling the weight of knowledge from two timelines. We're going to need to fundamentally change how humanity understands death. The old model, death as ending, ghosts as aberrations, the afterlife as unknowable, it's breaking down. The membrane can't hold if people don't believe in it. The journey back to shore was different from the journey out. Now that I existed in two timelines simultaneously, I could see the ice roads as they truly were, not just paths across frozen water, but corridors through time and possibility. Each crack in the ice was a decision point where timelines diverged. Each pressure ridge was where parallel realities pressed against each other. Jen walked beside me, occasionally glancing over with a mixture of concern and fascination. So, you're basically two people now? More like one person with two sets of memories, I explained, though even that wasn't quite right. I remember your funeral in Other Mac's timeline, closed casket, because there wasn't enough left to display. But I also remember you complaining about the coffee at the station this morning. Both memories are equally real. That's got to be messing with your head. Less than you'd think. The human brain is surprisingly adaptable. It's already used to processing dreams and reality, memories and imagination. This is just more. The assembled dead had dispersed, returning to their eternal patrols, but my grandmother's memory remained with us. As we walked, she taught me what Other Mac's timeline had never learned, the true history of the anchors. It started before recorded history, she said, her voice carrying the weight of generational knowledge. When the first humans crossed Beringia, The land bridge between Asia and North America, some fell through the ice, but instead of dying, they became the first members of what would become the collective. They chose to stay, to guide others across safely. The original protocol, I understood. Every culture that's lived near Superior has had anchors. The Ojibwe called them Gichi Manidug, the great spirits who walked between worlds. The French voyageurs called them les gardiens des glaces, the ice guardians. The lumber barons of the 1800s knew them as the Winter Watch. Different names, same purpose: maintain the balance between the living and the dead. Captain Harrison, who had been silent during our trek, finally spoke. The Michigan State Police formalized it in 1917, but we were just institutionalizing what had always existed. Every state trooper who's died in the line of duty near Superior has been offered the choice: move on or join the watch. Most move on. But enough stay to maintain the network. We were approaching the shore now. Our patrol car, which had been sinking into solid ice, was somehow back on the surface, intact and running. The black Dodge Ram was parked beside it, empty but with the keys in the ignition. The suspects? Jen asked. Never existed in this timeline, Harrison explained. The destabilizer attracted them from a parallel reality where they were running from something worse. Now that it's destroyed, they've been returned to their own timeline, or what's left of it. I felt other Mac's memories stir. In his timeline, those same two men had been leaders of a cult that worshipped the rupture, believing the merger of life and death would bring about a new form of existence. They weren't entirely wrong, just catastrophically premature. It was 3:33 a.m. when we finally made it back to shore, the exact midpoint of the night, when the membrane was most stable. As my feet touched solid ground that wasn't ice, I felt the full weight of what I'd become. I was an anchor now, forever tied to Lake Superior and its collective. I could leave the physical area, but part of me would always be here, monitoring the balance, maintaining the protocol. So what now? Jen asked. Do we report this? Tell everyone that the dead walk on Lake Superior after midnight. We evolve the protocol, I said, the knowledge from both timelines synthesizing into a plan. Gradually, carefully. Start with the other troopers, the ones who already suspect something. Then expand to emergency services, the Coast Guard, anyone who works near the lake. Build understanding slowly, so when the membrane does weaken, and it will, people are prepared, not panicked. Harrison nodded. I'll handle the brass. After 40 years of service, I've got enough credibility to push through some unusual training protocols. We'll call it enhanced environmental awareness, or some bureaucratic nonsense that sounds harmless. What about the public? Jen asked. Stories first, my grandmother's memory suggested. Legends, folklore, fiction that contains enough truth to prepare people without triggering panic. Let artists and writers be the prophets. They always have been. Gordon Lightfoot knew more than he was saying when he wrote about Edmund Fitzgerald. A car pulled up, an unmarked state police vehicle. The door opened, and out stepped someone I recognized but had never met. Colonel Patricia Stonefield, Michigan State Police. My aunt in this timeline. In other Mac's timeline, she'd died as a child from pneumonia. Mac, she said, her expression unreadable. We need to talk. She knew. Somehow, she knew everything. The Stonefield line, she continued, has been anchoring Superior for 7 generations. But you're the first to merge with a parallel self. That makes you something new, something we desperately need. She pulled out a folder marked with symbols I recognized. The same writing that appeared under the ice, the language of the collective. Operation Northern Light, she said. A joint task force between the Michigan State Police, the Coast Guard, the Canadian authorities, and others. We've been preparing for the 2029 convergence, the point when the membrane will be at its weakest. But your merger changes things. You can see across timelines, predict where the ruptures will occur. It's not just superior, I said, the knowledge flowing from other Max experiences. Every Great Lake has its own collective. Michigan, Huron, Erie, Ontario, they're all connected. When Superior's membrane fails, it triggers a cascade. All 5 lakes rupture simultaneously. Patricia's face paled. How many dead are we talking about? Every person who's ever died in or near the Great Lakes since they formed. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. And not just humans. Every consciousness the lakes have absorbed. Ships that developed awareness over decades of service. Animals that achieved something like sentience in their final moments. Even some machines. The Edmund Fitzgerald isn't the only vessel that chose to stay. Jen whistled low. That's an army of the dead. Or an army of protectors, I countered. It depends on how the living react. In other Mac's timeline, fear and violence turned them hostile. But if we prepare people, if we frame it right, the return, Patricia said softly. Not an invasion, but a homecoming. The dead returning not to harm, but to help, to share knowledge from beyond, to strengthen the barrier between worlds. Some won't accept it, Harrison warned. Religious groups will call it the apocalypse. Scientists will deny it until they see it. The military will want to weaponize it. Then we need allies in all those groups, Patricia said. Anchors aren't just individuals. They're networks. Mac, your merger makes you a hub. You can identify potential anchors across timelines, people who are naturally sensitive to the membrane. She was right. I could feel them now. Thousands of people across the Great Lakes region who had some connection to the collective. Descendants of anchor lines like mine. Survivors of near-death experiences on the lakes. Even some who'd simply spent enough time near the water to develop sensitivity. We have 5 years, I said. 5 years to build a network strong enough to hold the membrane when it weakens. 5 years to change how humanity thinks about death. Ambitious, Jen said. Impossible, even. So was walking on water, I replied, until it froze. Over the following weeks, the work began. Quietly, carefully, we started identifying and recruiting potential anchors. The protocol evolved from a simple prohibition, don't pursue onto lake ice after midnight, to a complex system of membrane maintenance. State troopers across Michigan began reporting unusual experiences during their night shifts. Dreams of walking on frozen lakes in summer. Voices on the radio speaking French from the 1700s. Glimpses of ships that had sunk decades ago sailing past in the fog. Instead of dismissing these reports, we cataloged them, identified patterns, built a map of where the membrane was thinnest. Jen became my partner in more than just patrol duty. Her sensitivity to the collective, combined with her pragmatic approach, made her invaluable in training new anchors. She developed a screening test, seemingly routine questions that revealed whether someone could perceive the membrane. Have you ever seen your breath fog on a warm day, but only over water? Do compasses act strangely in your presence? Have you ever heard Gordon Lightfoot's Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald playing when no radio was on? Simple questions that identified those touched by Superior's consciousness. My grandmother's memory became less frequent. Her purpose fulfilled now that I'd accepted my role. But before she faded completely, she gave me one last gift. The true name of Lake Superior in the oldest language. The one spoken by the first humans to cross its ice. Geechee Minneeson, she said. The Great Island. Not because there's an island in it, but because it is an island of accumulated consciousness in the sea of existence. Remember that, Macoons. You're not guarding a lake. You're guarding an island between life and death. 3 months after the merger, I stood again on the frozen surface of Lake Superior. It was midnight, the beginning of the forbidden time, but I was no longer just a trespasser. I was a recognized part of the system, an anchor with authority to walk the ice roads. The collective manifested around me, not as the chaotic press of bodies from that first night, but as an organized formation. The Edmund Fitzgerald crew maintained their eternal watch. The Voyageurs sang their endless songs. The Native Americans who first walked these paths nodded in acknowledgement of a duty passed down through generations. "Report," Captain McSorley requested, his voice carrying the authority of 50 years of service to the collective. "Membrane holding at 97% integrity," I replied. 3 minor breaches near Thunder Bay, already sealed. 17 new anchor candidates identified, timeline convergence proceeding as expected. And the other lakes? I closed my eyes, feeling through the network that connected all the Great Lakes. Michigan is stable. Huron shows some disturbance near the Manitou Islands. Eerie is complicated. There's something old there, older than the usual collective. Ontario is preparing for winter freeze. The ice roads will be strong this year. Good. And your parallel self? Any integration issues? I considered the question. The merger was complete now, the 2 timelines fully braided into one consciousness. I remembered both versions of every significant event in my life, could see how different choices led to different outcomes, but remained fundamentally myself. "Stable," I said. "The parallel memories are becoming more like possibilities I can access rather than competing realities. It's actually helpful for predicting membrane breach points. I can see where the timelines are most likely to diverge." "The brass wants a demonstration," McSorley said. "They're bringing congressional observers next month. They need to see that the collective is real but manageable." I laughed, the sound echoing across the ice. "They want us to perform for politicians?" "They want funding," McSorley replied pragmatically. "Operation Northern Light needs resources, anchor training facilities, equipment that can measure membrane integrity, public education campaigns. That all takes money." He was right. In other Mac's timeline, the lack of preparation had been partly due to budget constraints. No one wanted to fund paranormal nonsense until it was too late. "Fine," I agreed. "But we do it safely. Limited manifestation, controlled environment. And we choose which members of the collective appear. No one who died traumatically. No one who might trigger panic." "The children's choir from the Alpena," McSorley suggested. "They went down in 1880, but they've maintained their innocence. They still sing. Congress members have grandchildren. They'll respond to children." It was manipulative but effective. A month later, we arranged a careful demonstration on a section of Superior that had frozen early. The congressional delegation, bundled in heavy coats and looking skeptical, stood on the shore while we walked them through the reality of the protocol. At exactly midnight, the children's choir manifested on the ice. 12 children in period clothing, their voices carrying across the frozen water as they sang hymns from the 1880s. They were translucent but clearly visible, obviously not alive, but just as obviously not threatening. One congresswoman from Illinois started crying. "My grandmother used to sing that hymn," she said. "She claimed her mother had learned it from a ghost near Lake Michigan." "All the Great Lakes are connected," I explained. "What affects one affects all. The protocol isn't just about Superior, it's about maintaining the membrane across the entire watershed." "And in 2029?" asked a senator from Ohio. without preparation, without public understanding, without a network of trained anchors. I let other Mac's memories of his timeline's collapse color my voice. Catastrophe. Every person who's ever died in the Great Lakes manifesting simultaneously confused and desperate. The living panicking, fighting what they don't understand. The membrane tearing beyond repair. Reality itself becoming unstable around the lakes. But with preparation, a controlled event. The dead manifesting peacefully, sharing knowledge from across centuries, then returning to their patrols. The membrane strengthening from the conscious cooperation between living and dead. Humanity taking its next step in understanding what death really means. The funding came through. By winter of 2025, we had anchor stations around all 5 Great Lakes, each one staffed by people who had proven their sensitivity to the membrane, trained in both enforcement and metaphysical maintenance. The public education campaign had begun, carefully, subtly, movies and TV shows featuring, inspired by true events, stories about the lakes, documentaries that hinted at something more than normal beneath the waters, school curricula that included local legends and maritime folklore. We were preparing the cultural ground for the revelation to come. Jen had become a full anchor by then, having made her own choice to tie herself to the lakes. Not through merger like mine, but through gradual integration, spending so much time on the ice roads that she became part of them. "You know what I realized?" she said one night as we patrolled the frozen surface. "The protocol isn't a restriction. It's an invitation. Don't pursue onto lake ice after midnight, unless you're ready to become part of something bigger." She was right. Every trooper who'd ever broken the protocol had been given the same choice I had: join the system or remain apart from it. Most chose to remain apart, to forget what they'd seen, but enough joined to maintain the network. As 2029 approached, the signs became harder to hide. The membrane was thinning globally, not just around the lakes. The dead were becoming visible in peripheral vision. Electronic devices picked up voices from other timelines. The carefully constructed barrier between life and death was becoming transparent. But we were ready, or as ready as anyone could be for the biggest revelation in human history: that death wasn't an ending, just a transformation. That the dead hadn't gone anywhere. They'd just shifted to a different state of existence. That the lakes, the oceans, rivers, and streams were all conscious, all collecting and processing the souls that passed through them. On June 21st, 2029, the summer solstice, I stood on the shore of Lake Superior with thousands of others, anchors, government officials, media representatives, and ordinary citizens who'd been gradually prepared for this moment. At exactly noon, when the sun was highest and the membrane thinnest, Lake Superior gave up her dead. But not as the invasion other Mac's timeline had experienced. This was a coordinated emergence. The Edmund Fitzgerald rose from the depths, intact and crude, sailing past Whitefish Point one more time before dissolving back into the water. The children's choir sang from the ice that shouldn't exist in summer, but did for just this moment. Voyageurs paddled their canoes through the air above the water. Native Americans who'd lived here before European contact walked on the water, leaving no ripples. Every soul Superior had collected over 30,000 years made a brief appearance, not to frighten, but to be witnessed, acknowledged, remembered. The living and the dead stood together for 17 minutes, the exact length of time it had taken the Edmund Fitzgerald to sink, and then the membrane sealed itself, stronger than before. The world changed that day. Death was no longer the ultimate unknown. The afterlife had been verified, documented, studied. Some religions collapsed, others evolved, new ones emerged. Science expanded to include consciousness as a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism. But the protocol remained, evolved but recognizable. Don't pursue onto lake ice after midnight, unless you're prepared to see the truth about death. I'm still Mac Stonefield. I'm still a Michigan State Trooper. But now I'm also an anchor, existing in multiple timelines, monitoring the membrane, training the next generation of those who'll stand between the living and the dead. Lake Superior still freezes every winter. The ice roads still form. The dead still walk after midnight. The only difference is now we walk with them. If you're ever driving through the Upper Peninsula on a winter night and see lights on the ice after midnight, don't be afraid. It's just the collective on patrol, maintaining the balance, keeping the membrane stable. Wave if you want, they'll wave back. And if you're very lucky or very sensitive, you might hear the Edmund Fitzgerald's horn, sounding one last salute to the living before returning to its endless voyage through time and ice. The protocol protects us all, living and dead alike. Remember that next time you see a Michigan State Trooper parked by the lakeshore at midnight, watching the ice. We're not just enforcing the law, we're maintaining reality itself.